Okay, guys, welcome back to the Grimericans show. It's Darren here, as always, and with me, as always, is Graham. How's it going, Graham?
Hey, I'm doing great, Darren.
So we got a great guest tonight. We got Nick Redfern with us, author of a whole shitload of books. Graham kind of has a rundown for us, I think, of a few of them anyway.
Yeah, Nick's a prolific author of the Forteana phenomena. He's got all kinds of books like Final Events, The NASA Conspiracies, Real Men in Black, Keep Out, The Pyramids in the Pentagon, all kinds of great. Monster Files is one of his latest ones. So that's just to name a few. He's got many more than that. And Nick's one of these guys who, he goes to a lot of conferences. He's very approachable, makes himself available to all the fans. Like, you can chat with him. He's been on many radio shows and podcasts. He blogs on tons of websites. So he's out there just...
TV shows too, I think.
Yeah, I was going to mention that, yeah.
Ancient Aliens, and what was that, the monster one on history?
Monster Quest, maybe?
Yeah, I think, well, we might as well ask the man himself. How's it going tonight, Nick?
I'm good, thanks. How's it going with you?
Good.
Good.
You nice and warm down there?
The weather's been really weird because, like, last week, it was boiling hot. It was like 102 degrees for 5 days solid in Dallas. And but this week, from Sunday right through till like Tuesday night, it just did not stop raining at all. I mean, literally didn't stop at all for 2.5 days. And it dropped it right down to like the 70s. So that made it like a complete change. And everybody was like, oh, thank God for that.
That sounds kind of like our weather. It's up and down. Last weekend was like winter. And now we're sweating a bit. It's like summer. So thanks for coming on tonight. It's great to chat with you.
Oh, sure. I'm always happy to do radio and whatever, so it's, I don't mind at all.
Yeah, we got so much to talk to you about, all your books. And what's your latest one is what, Monster Files? Yeah,
that's been out since about the end of May, 22nd of May, I think it was. So it's about 2 months, just under 2 months old.
And you haven't got another one out yet?
Not quite. It actually looks sometimes like that I have sort of cranked out 2 or 3 books in one go. But what sometimes happens is that I'll finish one book because I'm with several different publishers. So I'll finish one book with one publisher, and they might say, well, we're putting several other books out, so we'll put it on hold for a year or 6 months. And then one of the other publishers says, well, we'll put this out on this date, and the two coincide together. So it looks like I've sort of had no life and just sort of, typed for 24 hours a day for, 2 years, which actually isn't the case. But sometimes it looks like that when the publishers cross over, it with the publication dates. And so people say, well, how did you manage to get, 2 or 3 written in that time? I said, well, I didn't. One was just sat in the shelves in the Word document for 8 months or whatever, at the publishers.
Yeah, I know. I think RPJ actually mentioned your army of typewriting monkeys that you have in your basement.
Or somebody said I got like a bunch of clones or something like that. And but no, it's just me. But I mean, joking aside, because this is what I do sort of full time, I like to sort of keep regular hours. If I'm not doing stuff like radio tonight or whatever, as far as writing's concerned, I sort of start about 7:30, 8 in the morning, take an hour's lunch, and then finish at 5. And I just put the laptop in sleep mode, and then at nights and weekends I do nothing related to any of this, unless like I'm promoting stuff like now. Mm-hmm. And I just have, I watch the English football, incorrectly called soccer, by the way, and or I'll go out with friends, hit the town or whatever on weekends, and you just have a good time. So for me, when you're sort of doing 8 hours a day, Monday to Friday, you can actually get a lot done when it's, it's a passion, but it's also a job. So I can sort of, I just do it solid 8 hours like a regular job, Monday to Friday, and you can get a lot done, when you're writing, and particularly if you got all the research done, and then it's just a matter of writing the thing, that does make it a lot easier then. So.
Yeah, and I see you just recently made Audible too, eh?
Yeah, that's kind of a first, and it's sort of cool. One of the books, Keep Out, New Page Books, they've done I don't know if they've done a deal as such or how many they're going to do, but they did like an audio version. You know, it's not like the old style, like a CD or a cassette or anything. It's, you know, just a downloadable one.
Yeah,
but, I mean,
we
it's
both
still
listened
good, you know.
to it.
Oh, okay. You know, I haven't actually had a chance to listen to it yet, so...
Yeah, it was pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it was a great book, but it was pretty good on audio. Like, I've listened to a ton of audiobooks, so it's a pleasure for me to have one of your books on there. Like, if you had all your books on there, I'd probably go through all of them. It's just hard.
Well,
it's hard
I mean,
to find enough time to read them.
Yeah, I mean, the ones that it's already out in audio is through New Page Books. So, you know, New Page may well do some others in audio, but I mean, the ones that aren't New Page, you know, I don't know if anything will ever happen with them, you know. So,
any thoughts on narrating one yourself?
I don't know if I got the energy and to do it. You know what I mean? I think I'd probably go crazy before I finish recording it. But
yeah, I could see
you know,
that.
sitting there and having to read your entire book. You know, for me, I shouldn't say this. You know, and it's one of my own books, but it'd be like watching paint dry. You know, it'd be like, you know, if I've got to read like 70,000 words out and make sure I don't make any mistakes. You know what I mean? And which I'm sure I would. And then you got to re-record it and re-record it. I think I'd sooner leave that up to the professionals. You know.
Yeah, no doubt. I don't think I could handle that either.
Yeah.
So on your blog today, you kind of had some big news. Would you mind giving us the rundown of what's going on there?
I had some big news.
I think you're condensing all your blogs to one new page now.
No. I did condense all my blogs about 18 months ago.
Oh, really?
I had like 9 or 10 different blogs, and they still exist. You know, I didn't close them down, but I had one on like cryptozoology, one on Men in Black, one on contactees. I had a different blog for all the different books so people would know where to go. But it just got too sort of chaotic. So about 18 months ago, I set up one new blog, and then what I did, I posted a message at the top of all the old blogs saying, you know, I'm going to consolidate them and just from now on just use this one blog, and here's the link. But that's not new. No, I did that like 18 months ago.
Oh, I guess I didn't notice the date. I was just on there like 10 minutes ago, and I was going through it. I was like, oh, look at that. I thought it actually said this morning.
Was it titled A Radical Decision?
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, that was the one. Yeah, I did that like about May last year, something like that.
Oh, I guess we're just late to the party.
Man, here Darren was thinking he got a scoop on you.
Well, you know, at least it gives me a chance to explain to people why, you know, the reason I stopped doing the blogs. I mean, the good thing is, you know, all the stuff is archived at those blogs. You can still find them, and they're linked at the new blog. And all the stuff goes back like to 2007, so there's 6 years worth of material there. But, you know, I just found it was easier to sort of just set one new one up and, you know, cover everything in one place, whether it's Bigfoot, you know, Loch Ness Monster, UFOs, paranormal stuff, lecture news, you know, whatever, you know.
How do you fit in all these different blogs when you're also writing books? Like, is it hard to juggle all the information and research?
Not really. I'll tell you for why. Because I mean, most of the books I do, I tend to the two main areas of interest I have are like UFOs and cryptozoology, which is unknown animals. But, you know, if I'm sort of working on two books at one time, and one's on Bigfoot and one's on, I know, hypothetically Roswell, because they're so different, you know, I can sort of spend, say, the morning doing the one book and the afternoon doing the other, because there's no sort of complication where your brain's sort of frazzled and you're trying to juggle the same material or similar material in two different books. It's totally different, so I can switch off from one, you know, and then switch on to another, and you know, and then if the afternoon before I finish I want to do a blog post or something for another site, you know, and if that's a different thing, well, you know, I can just crank that out because, again, you know, it's not sort of the same thing that your mind's been focused on for the last 4 or 5 hours or whatever.
Have you always been interested in like Fortean phenomena? I noticed that you started as you're kind of working on articles in magazines like Rock and Fashion and that type of thing. Did you have an interest back then?
Yeah, I did. I still actually do all that kind of writing now. I mean, the stuff I do in the paranormal world, it's probably about 60% of what I do maybe a little bit less is book writing and paranormal stuff. The rest is sort of regular journalism. But yeah, when I finished school, I worked on a fashion and music magazine back in England called Zero, and I was kind of like one of these late starters. I mean, I was crap at school. I was useless. You know, I barely made it through the English equivalent of high school. You know, I had no college education, no university, no degrees, nothing. You know, I walked out of school. I was like, fuck it. You know, literally, I'm done, and I didn't go back. And you know, it was one of these things where I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I did know that I didn't want to just be, you know, doing something I hated. I didn't want to go through life just doing something I didn't want. And so I actually just stumbled on a job that, just pure coincidence, that when I quit school and just left, a job was advertised where it was saying, you know, we're looking for somebody 16, 17 to train them, you know, to work on a magazine. And I thought, well, I'll try it. And lo and behold, I actually got the offer of it. So I did this for like 2 years. And they taught me everything from sort of, because I should have backtracked and said, although I wasn't pretty good at school, I always enjoyed writing stories when I was a little kid and reading, you know, but I was just not good on the academic, you know, exams and tests, that kind of thing. So I took the job on, and they taught me everything, sort of interview techniques, how to structure features and, you know, grab the reader's attention and split it up into, you know, sections and things like that. And I found I enjoyed it, you know, because one day I'd be sort of going to a concert and then reviewing it the next day, which didn't really come across like real work, you know. Oh, you're going to pay me to go and see a band and then write about it, okay. You know. So, and it was things like that, and they taught me sort of really, it's kind of like, you know, being thrown in the swimming pool at the deep end, you know, you've got to learn to swim, and when you're 16, it is a little bit daunting, but with hindsight, being thrown in at the deep end is the best thing that can happen to you, you know. So I did that, and then a lot of it afterwards was sort of just freelance. When that job finished after 2 years, I just started doing freelance stuff for like the British Daily Express newspaper and a few of the paranormal magazines that existed back then, and then sort of in the late 90s. The whole UFO, or mid-90s I should say, the whole UFO and paranormal scene in Britain really sort of went through the roof, and a lot of it was due to the success of the X-Files, and you had magazines all over the place on the newsstands, and so I started writing from them, and then took it from there really, and today, you know, I write the books, I do magazine articles. Also, a lot of people don't know this, I'm also a feature writer for Penthouse. I do a lot of work for them on all sorts of subjects, which is a pretty good gig. and you know, I do just any, you know, it's like any job. If you're self-employed, you know, writing's about all I can do. You know, I'm not sort of a roofer or a plumber. You know, I can't do those things. So I can only do what I can do. So you know, anything that's sort of writing, you know, I'll give it a try.
And you must spend quite a bit of your time, like, what I like about you is you're one of those authors that doesn't just, you know, read a book. You'll actually petition the government through Freedom of Information Acts, and really do a lot of homework to get the true story out.
Well, yeah, I mean, when it comes to UFO stuff, I like to use the Freedom of Information Act because I think it adds credibility. If you can demonstrate, you know, you've got files that have officially and legally being declassified through Freedom of Information regulations. And it's kind of like the same with the cryptozoology. You know, I mean, with Bigfoot, say, for example, or the Loch Ness Monster, or when I go out on these investigations, I tend to write the books how I did the investigation, sort of road trip style, you know. It was like, it was a dark and stormy night, you know, and I headed off to Loch Ness, that kind of thing. And the reason I write it like that is because that's how the investigations go on. You know, there's no point in me writing a book about the Loch Ness Monster if I'd never been to Loch Ness. You know, it's pointless. So I feel that if I'm going to write about weird creatures in the woods or the lakes, the very least you got to do is at least look for them, you know what I mean? And so that's, yeah, I always feel that research for me isn't, you know, downloading or copy-pasting 100 words from Wikipedia. It is, you know, mapping out the lake or whatever and going out there and camping out and just wandering in the local gas station, say, hey, you know, what's the deal with the local lake monster legend, you know, and just catch up with people in town and and do it that way. You know what I mean?
So have you ever? You must spend a lot of time in the woods. Have you ever had an experience of your own?
Well, the closest I've sort of come is finding like footprints, like Bigfoot type prints and things like that. And occasionally, I have heard sort of weird noises and grunts and strange stuff. I mean, granted, when you're in pitch black darkness in the woods, it's sometimes difficult to differentiate what you're hearing. But I mean, there've been a few occasions like that. Nothing where I could specifically say anything with 100% certainty, but where it has stuck in my mind, down the line, that wow, that was kind of odd. But again, I think that's the only way to get the answers, is to go looking. You're not gonna find Bigfoot on the internet. It's not going to come storming out of your computer. You know what I mean?
In a chat room.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, any UFO sightings?
No, I haven't. But why I got interested in all this was because my dad was in the British Royal Air Force. He worked on radar, and he was actually involved in several UFO incidents. He was a radar mechanic, and this was back in the 50s, and he was involved in several cases during a NATO exercise called Mainbrace, which went on in 1952 in September. And this was a case of the radar trackers picking up these fast-moving objects over the English Channel and the North Sea, coming in from the direction of like Scandinavia, Norway, Denmark and Sweden. And nobody had any idea what these things were. They were flying at incredible speeds and heights, clearly far outweighing anything that any terrestrial nation was flying. And fighter planes were scrambled. The pilots picked them up but couldn't get close to them. And this went on for several nights, and everybody was told not to talk about it. And my dad didn't say anything until I was like 14 years old. This was sort of 30 years later or something. And that's what got me interested, as my dad's experience. And even today, if he's asked about it, he'll say, well, we don't know what it was, but they were definitive UFOs. And not just because it was my mum and dad, but because he was somebody trained in the military, that made me sort of think, wow, there's something to this. And I began sort of reading books on it, and that expanded into John Keel's stuff on strange creatures and people like Brad Steiger. And, those are the people I sort of got into when I was like, 10, 11, 12. And when the other kids at school were reading like British equivalents of the Hardy Boys, I was reading all about John Keel conjuring up, ultra-terrestrials from some weird dimension or whatever.
So, and your latest one is Monster Files. What's your favorite cryptid?
Well, probably I've got a couple. I mean, one of them, actually not too far from where I grew up in central England, which is I grew up near a place in a county called Staffordshire, which is a heavily forested and wooded area. And there's a legend there of a Bigfoot-type creature that's been seen on a number of occasions, become known as the man monkey. And stories go back to the 19th century. But why I find it fascinating is because in some respects the creature seems flesh and blood, but there are other aspects to it where it's more sort of paranormal-like, has these sort of supernatural overtones to it, which I think, looking at some of these creatures, a lot of them do, actually. I don't think they're just sort of flesh and blood animals. I think there's something more supernatural about them. So that was one that is one of the favourites because it was so close to where I used to live that, I could go out and investigate the area, etc. And the other one is the chupacabra of Puerto Rico, for two reasons. One, I love Puerto Rico. I've been there on a number of occasions. It's just a cool place to go. I could happily live in Puerto Rico. It's particularly San Juan, the capital. It's a great place. But also, going to Puerto Rico and speaking to the locals, when you get story upon story from very credible people like police officers, veterinarians, farmers, and members of the public, all telling you they've seen this weird creature like a hairless monkey with bat-like wings and this row of spikes down its head like a punk rock mohawk or something like that. It's difficult to dismiss what they're saying. So, that's probably the other one I have a lot of, a favourite one I have a lot of good memories of, because you get to run around Puerto Rico as well.
Yeah, I guess it doesn't matter what you're looking for.
No, well, yeah, no, really, no.
What about the Loch Ness Monster? How was your trip to Loch Ness?
Well, yeah, I mean, Loch Ness is an interesting place. I mean, where I lived in England, Britain overall, Wales, Scotland, and England combined isn't a large nation. Actually, a lot of people don't realise that, again, England, Scotland, and Wales combined is actually smaller in terms of square miles than the state of Texas, where I live now. That's how small Britain is. But Loch Ness is actually, a large body of water. It's like 22 miles long, roughly about a mile wide, and about 800 feet deep. And it's only sort of when you get there you realise the sort of sheer size of it. Now, I actually do believe there are unknown animals in Loch Ness. I don't personally go with the idea of the plesiosaur, a surviving marine reptile from the dinosaur era. I think there are a number of things that aren't in favour of it being a plesiosaur. I think there's a good possibility that these creatures could be giant eels. Now, there are reports of eels growing to like 12 to 14 feet, but we could be talking about things that are like 30 feet long, which is unheard of, literally. But so, if you were to come across a 30-foot long eel with a body the size of like 2 oil drums in width, and most people probably wouldn't quibble that was a monster, it comes barreling towards you through the water. So, the Scottish Tourist Board might love it if it was a plesiosaur, but I think it's probably going to be possibly like a mutated creature, like suffering from something like gigantism of a regular species, if you like.
So would that make it a one of, or?
Well, that's interesting because eels, to mate, they all sort of migrate back to the Sargasso Sea. And most of them live at least 10 years before that. And there are stories of what are known as eunuch eels, where they don't spawn and they don't migrate back to the Sargasso. They stay where they were, and they can actually live and live and live and grow and grow and grow. And we don't really know how long they can live for and how big they can grow. So, I think it's possible that some of these eunuch eels, as they're known, could be responsible for the Loch Ness Monster. And at any given time, there only might be a couple of them. You don't have a colony because the others don't mutate and grow to massive size. It's like a spontaneous mutation in one or two. So, I think that could explain why sometimes we have like a wave of sightings of the Loch Ness Monster that go on for like 5 or 6 years, and then it goes quiet for another 10 years or something, and then it suddenly starts up again. Maybe that could be explainable if, you've got one creature that lives for like 15 years, it dies, and then there's nothing, and then another mutation comes along in another 5 years, and then the sightings start again. And for us, it looks like, well, there's got to be a colony of them. But actually, there might not be. It may just be one random or two random ones at any given time.
So do you think that could explain Champy and the Ogopogo too, then?
Well, I mean, it could do. I mean, granted, I'll be the first to admit, we're dealing with sort of a lot of unknown quantities and, different angles. I mean, for example, one of the things that the eel scenario doesn't necessarily explain is like the large, thick, humped back. I mean, an eel can certainly bend its body and change it, but, whether or not it would actually be able to arch it into a complete hump, that's a different thing. So some of the reports, I think we've got to look at all cases on their own merits. I mean, for example, here in Texas, where I am, I live just on the fringes of Dallas, and, I can go only an hour or so to where there have been reports of lake monsters, but when you look into them, they're not like the Loch Ness Monster or Champ. A lot of them sound like really big catfish. And when I say really big, I mean monstrous-sized catfish. And also very large alligator gar. Alligator gar are very ancient and strange-looking fish that look a bit like an alligator. It's like an alligator's head on a long broomstick is the best way you can describe them. And they are acknowledged to having grown up to about 11 feet long, but we got reports from some Texas lakes of like 15 or 18 foot long monsters. So in that sense, I think some lake monsters, as I said, could be unknown animals. Others are just giant regular animals that when you see them, they look like a monster. So in other words, I think we've got to take all these stories, whether it's Champ or Ogopogo or whatever, each case has to be separately examined and, not have the tendency to lump them all into it's all this or it's all that,
Have you been to Ogopogo yet, or to
No,
Okanagan?
I haven't been to that one. No, it's the
It's
sort of
worth
sheer
it.
scale of the US. It sometimes makes traveling a bit difficult.
Yeah, it's definitely worth the trip. Lake Okanagan's a pretty beautiful place.
Yeah, yeah, that's huge. I mean, that like dwarfs Loch Ness.
Is that like the pictures you have on one of your Mysterious Universe blogs? I think is actually just what we were talking about, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, I did an article just the other day on lake monsters and why we don't ever find a corpse.
Right.
The skeptics say, well, it's because they don't exist. But my view is that if these creatures are some sort of fish, then whereas we derive oxygen from the atmosphere, from walking around in the air, they get their oxygen from water. It's basically filtered through their gills. They have gills instead of lungs, like us. So, in other words, if these creatures are some sort of fish and they live chiefly in, or just only in the water, well, when they die, they're going to sink. The smaller fish are going to eat them. Chances are a body of that size, it's not going to get washed up on the shore because it's so heavy. It's going to sink down, when it's not alive to keep its motion going. So I think that's one of the main reasons why we don't have a corpse, because, you look at some of these huge lakes that are more than 100 miles long in the US. Well, if one of these creatures dies, you've got to be in the right place at the right time on the right day just to see it. And it's got to conveniently die in front of you, for you to be able to get it. And who's to say you're even going to see it if it spends all its life, or the most of its life, underwater? So that's why I think we haven't found these things, because the logistics of being, as I said, in the right place at the right time are just too massive, really.
Do you think Charlie Sheen will have any luck?
You never know. If anyone's going to, maybe Charlie would.
Yeah, we were joking about that the other day. Wouldn't it be a bitch if Charlie Sheen turned out to be the one to find it?
Well, I mean, if we got the answers, I mean, I don't think it would really matter. It would be sort of whoever it was. I mean, whoever it was that found these things, they would just be eclipsed by, the story of the creature itself. You know what I mean?
What about some of these stories of underground caverns, like connecting lakes and oceans and all this?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's an interesting story about that with Loch Ness. I mean, Loch Ness at one point was open to the Atlantic Ocean. If you look at a map and you see Scotland, you'll see that Loch Ness is landlocked. But during the last ice age, we know from studying the shifts in the environment that Loch Ness was open to the ocean. And then when you had these massive glaciers and ice, for hundreds of years, tens and hundreds of years, it re-sculpted the landscape. So anything that was in the loch prior to the last ice age, and if it didn't get out, when the ground became landlocked, then, it wouldn't be able to escape unless, there were, for example, tunnels underneath Loch Ness. And there have been a lot of stories about divers going down very deep and seeing what looked like entrances to sort of wider caverns deep below the regular base of the loch. And people have suggested, well, maybe these creatures sort of migrate in and out of Loch Ness. And, when people talk about seeing sea serpents in the Atlantic and lake monsters in Loch Ness, maybe it's actually the same things, but seen in different locations. Now, the only downside with that is that Loch Ness is freshwater and the Atlantic is seawater, it's salt water. But there are some creatures which can operate and in both environments. For example, you have saltwater crocodiles and freshwater crocodiles. So it's not impossible that a creature could adapt. And when you see these stories about caverns and caves and tunnels, it's not out of the question that they might come and go, and that might explain why sometimes we have a rash of reports for a year or two, and then it dies down. Maybe the creatures are migrating and then coming back further down the line.
Isn't it crazy that we can land shit on Mars, but we still can't find these tunnels at the bottom of the oceans or at the bottom of the lakes?
Well, the main reason is because, landing people on Mars and whatever, you have government funding to a massive degree. It's like if I had unlimited funding, in the same way that the government funds NASA and then NASA builds whatever and flies it to Mars. If I had unlimited funding to hire a mini sub for 6 months and rent a property on the shores of Lake Champlain or whatever, there's a good chance I could find something. But most of us in this field, we're not millionaires by any means, and unless we win Powerball or the lottery or whatever, we're not going to be able to hire a sub for 6 months and a big cabin on the lakeside and do this permanently, as I said, for however long. And so for that reason, I think people don't realise that we're sort of limited by what we can do with available funding. It's easy to land things on Mars when you've got $1 billion budget. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I suppose, and the fact is, like a lot of the people in this field are working day jobs and doing this in their spare time. I mean, there's only a few of you that have had enough success to do it as a full-time job, and even you are doing other things. On, like you said, your 40% of your writing is in a different field.
I couldn't earn a living from writing books. There's just no way. But I do earn a living working as a writer across the board, and but in saying that, I mean, even earning a living as a writer, I have to constantly do it Monday to Friday non-stop. I'm not complaining, but I'm just pointing out so people understand that I have to do that Monday to Friday and keep regular job hours to stay on top of things, and so even earning a living as a writer, I couldn't take 2 months off to go to this lake or that lake because I wouldn't be earning money in the day, to live or pay bills or whatever. So in that sense, that is problematic, and that's the difference. A lot of the skeptics and debunkers just don't appreciate that. They say, well, we found this and we found that. Well, yeah, because you're funded by a government agency for $500 million. Anyone can find things, when you've got something like that. It's far less easy to do when, you've got like a wife and a kid or a job that, you work nights or whatever, you know what I mean? That's the day-to-day logistics of everyday living that people don't think about when you try and apply it to investigating things,
Yeah, and there's not really a lot of money in the field. I mean, they always seem to, the skeptics and debunkers always seem to think that people are out there writing books to make millions. I mean, that's not the case. Do you ever get frustrated with them at all? Like, do they give you a hard time?
I do. Yeah, I mean, I've had that before. People say, oh, Nick Redfern writes books for the money. I'm like, do you know what I earn for writing books? It's not like people think, a $20,000 or $50,000 advance. It's a small figure, and it's usually split across a year, like 2 6-monthly payments. And again, I'm not complaining. It's just it pisses me off when people say, they assume I'm living in, a mansion with a Ferrari or whatever. I've had this a lot where people say, oh, you do it for the money.
Yeah.
Well, if I was doing it for the money, I'd be doing something else.
50 Shades of Nick.
What's that?
You'd be writing crap like 50 Shades of Nick.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, I wouldn't be writing. It's like writing is a notoriously hazardous job. You've got to, if you do that full time, you do it because it's your passion. And you do what you have to. I am a sort of person who's driven, to succeed. I don't accept defeat. And so I do what I have to do, to earn a living. And as I said, I branch out and do all sorts of different writing, like Penthouse and military magazines and regular newspapers and music stuff and all sorts of things, because that's what I have to do. But yeah, I mean, if people understood the reality, of how hazardous, I mean, it's rewarding in terms of, you can see when you've done something, you get your books in the mail or whatever. It's rewarding, but I wouldn't recommend it to anybody who wants to become a millionaire. The J.K. Rowlings and the Stephen Kings of the world are the exception. Most people are like me, where you got to be careful, and you keep your electric bills down, and you have to just be careful.
Do you think has it been changing our culture? Is it opening up at all in the last decade or two?
Well, I think the one thing that I am encouraged about is that certainly in the last 10 years, TV has promoted paranormal stuff at a far greater amount than it did, years ago. And there isn't the outright debunking and, just poking fun at it that there used to be. And a lot of these paranormal shows, the believers and the investigators are given a good forum. They always have the skeptics and the debunkers on because they feel they've got to balance it out. But at least, the believers are also given a good ability to present their argument. So I think that's a good thing. And unfortunately, the way TV works, that's about the best you're going to get is sort of a balanced, where they feel they've always got to bring in the skeptics, even if they've got nothing new to say, or they're just saying tired old arguments all the same. They feel they've got to round them up and bring them on in the wheelchairs and the walking sticks. The things have been parroting for 60 years. But so for that reason, that pisses me off.
Right.
But I am encouraged that, we have got more of a voice, particularly with reality TV. But in saying that, reality TV, is a bit of a double-edged sword, because I did a blog post on this at my blog, and it's actually the most popular post at the blog. And it has been for like a year or whenever I wrote it. And it was basically like the top 10 things that piss me off about reality TV. All this, everything's all the same, night scope equipment running around the woods. What the hell was that? Did you hear this? And they're all exactly the same. You can substitute Bigfoot for lake monsters for UFOs, but the formula is identical. And reality TV, done right, can be sort of really gripping, groundbreaking, at the edge TV. But it's been watered down and sanitized, and essentially, it's had its nuts cut off in simple terms. And people just now, you have all these shows that last like 6 episodes where, we'll roll into town, we'll take the video cameras, we'll take the night vision equipment, we'll have the guys running around the woods sounding breathless, and we'll get them to shout, "What was that?" 6 times. And that's the show.
Yeah, and then even when stuff happens, they seem to, like you said, cleanse it or edit it out or something. Like I've heard stories where it sounds like there's some great footage and there's some true phenomena happening, and it just doesn't get presented in that light.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I've seen shows done, and I've actually been on a couple where, they actually did pick up some interesting stuff, kind of like what you're talking about. But the theme of the show, unfortunately, was to try and make fun of the researchers, and it got left out because the data actually didn't make fun. It upheld their angle, and, that isn't what they wanted. So, you're up against that. But the way I also look at it is that any publicity, I won't say any publicity is good publicity, but when at least you get a voice, and particularly on live TV, that's much better as well,
Yeah, and the colossal expansion of the internet in the last 15 years isn't hurting either.
I mean, anybody can have a say on this or that nowadays, and I think that's an important thing, because you're right, prior to that, it was just the speakers at conferences and people on TV shows, and other people think, well, I could do that, I could talk about this. And now people can, with YouTube or whatever, just upload your own videos or whatever and say, and I think that's a good thing. I mean, I actually know, there's a lot of egos in this field. I don't have much time for that. But there are people like, well, I'm the researcher of this, I'm the Roswell researcher, and I'm the face on Mars person, and I'm that, and well, it's all crap, It's like we're all looking for answers. And that's why, I enjoy going to conferences, hanging out with people. I'm not one of these, well, don't talk to me, I'm an author, and who are you to talk to? I'm in the bar, hanging out with everybody, having a beer and talking about whatever people want to talk about, because I view it that we're all on the same level. And somebody who's been in the subject for 50 years might never find the answers. Somebody might come along tomorrow who's been in it 6 months, and they're only 17 years old, and they stumble on the truth. You know what I mean? So,
or Charlie Sheen.
Or Charlie Sheen. So to sort of take this stupid approach of I'm this, I'm that, and no one else can touch my territory, it's ridiculous, and it just makes a person look totally stupid,
Yeah, that's what Darren and I met you at the Paradigm Symposium last year, and that's what I really like that about you, just how you hung out so much, how you're approachable. You guys sat down and chatted about stuff for hours. I mean, it's just
beers.
Fascinating. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't. It's not like a put on or a, you know, or forced. It's because, you know, I like to hang out with people. I don't go to conferences to, you know, do the lecture and then run off the stage and sit in the hotel room. You know, it's stupid. You know?
Make the bands.
Yeah. So, you know, I enjoy hanging out. You know, being social. You know, I'm not one of these sort of, you know, peering through the blind types or whatever. So. And like I said, it's, you know, it's fun as well. That's the whole point. I mean, what I do and what we do should be, you know, you should, yeah, it's important and it's research and there's important things to find out that could change the world. But equally, you know, you've got to have fun in life as well and make it entertaining at the same time. So.
Yeah, I think it's opening up a bit myself. Like, I'm more comfortable talking to people. Well, not that I was ever really that uncomfortable, but people seem to be open to this now. In my day-to-day life, I can talk to people, and that's why I want to do the podcast too, to just be able to talk about this stuff and for people to be able to listen and think, you know, it's okay to talk about, you know, meditation, spiritual stuff, UFOs, cryptids, whatever the case is.
Yeah, well, I mean, my view has always been, you know, if people like what I say or don't like what I say, I don't care. You know, if I bump into somebody or just get talking with someone, they say, hey, what do you do? You know, I don't say, oh, well, you know, I'm a writer. I say, you know, I write books about Bigfoot or whatever. And they're like, oh. You know, sometimes they're like, oh. Well, you know, you can just see the brain sort of, you know, thinking, nutcase. You know? But then other times when you actually get speaking to people, I often find most people will actually say, well, you know, I don't really mention it, but I saw this or a friend of mine told me this. You know what I mean? It's like everybody, whether it's like a ghostly experience or, you know, a dead relative or a UFO sighting or a cryptid or anything, you know, everybody has got a story that either they were personally involved in, even if it's just once in a lifetime, or they've got a friend or a family member who told them something. Yeah. And, you know, so that's why I'm happy to talk about it, because I know in everybody's closet, so to speak, there's at least one story like this anyway. So, you know, they got no reason or, you know, to sort of look at me and judge me. You know what I mean?
So you're back. I think you're back as keynote at this year's Paradigm.
I don't think I'm the keynote. No. But,
I thought Micah said you were going to be the keynote speaker.
Oh,
no, that's another scoop Darren thought he had.
I think you're living in like another alternative universe right now.
Yes,
where I was crowned King of England or something. But no, I mean, I don't care when I speak. You know, I actually enjoy speaking first, you know, because then I got the weekend.
Oh yeah, you don't have to worry about it. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
So,
I think that's.
I don't mind. You know, I don't mind if I speak to 10 people or 10,000. It's you know, it's all the same.
Yeah, you seem pretty comfortable up there. What are you going to talk about this year then?
Well, I've got a new book out it actually comes out 2 days before the conference. It's called For Nobodies, Eyes Only, and it's like a study of, it takes a different approach. It's like a study of UFO cases and conspiracy cases where the evidence is missing. Like, for example, there's a chapter on Roswell, you know, and it's like when the government accounting office, General Accounting Office, did its investigation of Roswell in 1994. They found that all the outgoing messages from Roswell, from the base, from 45 to 49, were just gone.
Oh.
You know, they couldn't, and they still have never found them. So it's like that. It's called For Nobody's Eyes Only because it deals with cases where it's not so much the evidence is being, you know, that it's there and we know something happened. It's just where, you know, the government isn't saying we're withholding it and you can't see it. It's like somebody's removed it, you know, and it's in some Hangar 18 type place.
Yeah. Like the
so I'll be speaking about that anyway.
That's good. So like the UK, when they released all the files and the Rendlesham ones were gone, that type of thing?
Yeah, there's a chapter on Rendlesham that digs into that whole issue of all the Rendlesham files that are missing and that should be there but aren't there. But it's not just a case of saying, you know, repetitively saying, oh, they're missing. No, it digs into where they might be and the rules and regulations that can be applied to, you know, actually hiding files and legally denying their existence, you know. So it looks into the sort of bureaucratic issues as well of how and why material can be, you know, withdrawn and then denied, etc. So.
That's a great idea. So you're finding lots of info for that book?
Yeah, that book's actually finished because the way it works, you know, it takes the publisher like 3 months to read it, proof it, edit it, design the cover, get all the pictures in order, and that's like a dual process back and forth between me and the publisher and the editor. So, but that'll be out like 2 days before the conference. So I'll be speaking on that one there. But yeah, I enjoy doing lectures, and it's like anything. The first one you do, it's a bit nerve jangling. The first one I did was like I don't know, mid-90s, and you kind of race your way through it, and at the end you're like, what did I say?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Your mouth's kind of dry, and then the next one a little bit easier and whatever, and then after that it's just like learning to swim or ride a bike. It's something you just get used to it then.
So we were talking a couple of weeks ago to Nigel Wright out of the UK, and he was talking about in the late 90s, like 97, I think, there was like some UFO and some paranormal flaps and mutilations sweeping across the UK. Were you still over there when that was going on?
Yeah, I moved over here in 2001. Nigel's actually a good friend of mine, and I used to spend a lot of time down by where Nigel lives when all that was going on. But yeah, there was sort of in Devon, where Nigel was living at the time, you had this huge wave, like 96 to about 98, where people were seeing UFOs, and there were strange stories like whale mutilations in the ocean. Bodies, whale bodies being washed up on the shore with looked like organs, as if they'd been surgically removed, and people were seeing strange lights hovering over the sea, and a lot of odd stuff as well, like sudden increase in witchcraft and what sounded like satanic rituals, and strange creatures supposedly being conjured up through these rituals and then wildly on the loose in the moors and whatever. It was sort of. And Nigel actually co-wrote a book with a good friend of mine, John Downs, called The Rising of the Moon, which is all about that wave of encounters.
Yeah, he was a great chat. He actually does some blogging for us over at the Grimericans site as well.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, Nigel's a great guy. I'm glad we our paths crossed.
Mm-hmm.
So what about, speaking of phenomena in the UK then, have you written about crop circles, or have you ever been interested? Have you seen them?
Yeah, I've been in a lot of crop circles over the years, going back through to the 90s and the 2000s, and I've done a lot of investigations of them. I'm not 100% convinced they're actually tied to UFOs. I think it could be sort of more a paranormal thing. Mm-hmm. And, one of the interesting things that a lot of people don't realize, you have the skeptics and the debunkers saying, oh, they're all made by people. Well, we know that people do make some of them, but there's this sort of unspoken angle within not so much unspoken, but he sort of kept quiet, is that a lot of the human people, the people, not the human people, the people who've made crop circles, a lot of them have actually had weird experiences in formations that they've made, and they've actually felt like channeled by something to create them. A friend of mine, Matthew Williams, he's made a number of very good formations, and Matthew is firmly convinced that his mind was sort of, something downloaded, the idea into his brain and said, to his subconscious, basically saying, make this formation. And his experience where he's made a formation and somebody else has made a very similar one on the same night. And it's like some energy has been instilled in the formation, and people have had weird experiences like missing time and health improvements and things like that. And he actually feels that, maybe there are genuine crop circles made by paranormal phenomena, but he thinks that this phenomenon uses the human makers as well. And it's kind of like a modern-day equivalent of stone circles where, they're clearly made by people, like Stonehenge, but people talk about these ancient stone sites having paranormal powers and energies, and it's kind of like a modern-day equivalent, that it's not a case of, I don't think it's a case of these things being made by gleaming saucers hovering over the field and then flattening them, any more than I think it's made by hoaxes. I think it's far more subtle, and it has a great deal to do with things like ritual magic and portals and dimensions to other realms, where maybe some sort of almost like an ethereal intelligence comes through and, sort of manipulates the people and possibly, almost like remotely makes these things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I feel like that's one phenomena that's totally underestimated, and it's almost like the one that it almost frustrates me more than any other one, that there's still such a polarization between people that think there's a genuine phenomena and people that just debunk the whole thing, and they don't want to look at any of this, the plethora of evidence and strange, things surrounding the mystery.
No, that's right. I mean, when you've got people who've made their own formations and then other people start seeing weird things like little balls of light hovering over the formation, then I think it says more about, what we perceive as reality. We don't really know what reality is. It's almost as if you can create reality. You build this formation and it somehow instills like a magical element in it,
Mm-hmm.
I think on Through the Wormhole last night, they said there's like a 5% chance that we're living in some sort of a simulation.
Well, you got to wonder something. I mean, I find that one of the things that happens to me, and I know it happens to a lot of researchers, is that, the more you dig into a lot of these weird things, it's like the phenomena, they notice that you're looking into them. And, I've started, once I've started, because it's gone on for years, but I experienced like a lot of weird synchronicities where you're looking for answers on something, and an answer that you're right then looking for pops up in like the weirdest way. Mm-hmm. And it is almost like, reality is being created for you as you're going along, or there's some sort of guiding thing in the program, that's pushing you down this path, or, downloading an update to this program or that program. And, I often think that reality as we perceive it actually isn't what it is. I think there is something to be said that we can alter reality simply by thinking about something that, not in the sense that it alters the past, but it opens up an avenue to what you're looking into. And, sort of reality joins the dots together, almost like, defragmenting a computer or whatever. It gets rid of the fragmented spaces and brings it closer together. And I think it's like a similar thing where you're looking into something and it's almost like a defrag occurs where it brings you closer to it. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, that's actually a really good way to put it.
I wonder about that too, because we're getting so advanced with our computer technology and our software and our storage capacities. And I mean, it wouldn't take much for a civilization 1,000 years or...
Yeah. I'm telling you, I was saying last episode that our minds have already been harvested by Google for data crunching, and this is just to keep us from revolting.
Yeah. Well, who knows? Maybe we're all in like some vats, like in the Matrix, feeding the machines. And but if that is the case, I wish that you could like change the program just to turn the outside temperature down a little bit. You know what I mean? We don't need a simulation where it really does feel like 110,
So, what's in all your research? Is there anything out there that's just like even too fucked up for you, even?
I wouldn't say things that are sort of much too fucked up. What I would say is more, there's some things that just don't really interest me. And I don't sort of, people think I'm running around like a headless chicken investigating every weird thing under the sun. I'm actually not. I've never investigated like a ghost sighting or a haunted house.
Yeah.
And I rarely ever get involved in anything like straightforward political conspiracies, or that's just not my area, so to speak. But ghost stuff, Ouija boards, that kind of thing, I've never really got into that unless there's a case where there's like a UFO overtone, like with the Men in Black. That's one of my big interests, and there are some cases where they do have like paranormal and almost like occult overtones, but I don't go out my way to investigate poltergeists and that sort of thing. So it's not because it's weird or it unsettles me. I just don't find it very interesting, and that's not any disrespect to people who do ghost hunting. We can't all be interested in the same thing. You know what I mean? Some people like restoring old aircraft or old cars. Somebody else likes to paint. We're all different, and for me, I just don't get any sort of vibe from ghost stuff. So, I stay away from that, but not for any, freaky, far-out reason. But, for the most part, if it's something that interests me, I'll dig into it as deep as I can, and hopefully, if not uncover all the answers, at least, say I tried the best, So.
Yeah, and it seems like you're trying a lot. I really, the latest one I read was the one I picked up at Paradigm was the NASA conspiracies, and that one
Oh
I
yeah.
really enjoyed. That's my favorite one
Oh,
so far.
no, thanks. I mean, it's one of these things where a lot of people don't know. You know, people say, well, why did you write this book or why did you write that book? I thought, well, the publisher assigned it and asked me to. You know, and sometimes that's what happens. I would say probably my books are sort of split 50-50 between ideas that I've submitted to the publisher and ones where the publishers have said to me, hey, Nick, you know, we want somebody to write a book on this topic. Are you interested in doing it? And, you know, if I say, well, not really, it's not my field, you know, they'll go to somebody else, you know, thank you very much. And if I say, well, yeah, you know, they say, well, can you put us together like a 10-page synopsis? And that's what happened with the NASA book. You know, I had no intention of writing that book, but New Page said to me, hey, you know, we want to do a book on the history of NASA and UFOs. Are you interested in doing it? So I put the synopsis together, they liked it, and so I wrote it. So, you know, that's often how it works, is that, you know, the book is an assignment that the publishers come up with. I mean, you know, that's happened with a few for New Page. Probably, I've done 8 books, I think, with New Page books, and I think 4 were my ideas and 4 were their ideas.
That's got to be flattering.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, it sort of shows they have, you know, that they're sort of secure in your writing style and in knowledge that, you know, you're going to do solid research, etc., that they come to you rather than you having to sort of go knocking on their doors, so to speak. So, you know, that's a good thing. And of course, when you do it a few times, you know, they know that they can hopefully rely on you. And so that's what I do. You know, you do whatever the assignment is. Same way if you go to work and the boss says, I want this done by 5 o'clock. You know, it's the same thing, really.
Mm-hmm. So what about in your normal life? Do you pay attention to the mainstream media news at all? Like, where do you get your kind of fix of current events?
Oh, you know, I mean, I sort of watch, you know, the 5 and the 6 o'clock news and the internet. You know, I'll sort of check out the regular news and then, you know, some alternative stuff. But yeah, I sort of watch the 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock news, and then I'm done with it. And I watch Bill Maher on a Friday. Well, I record it so I can watch it on a Saturday morning when I'm at home. I watch Bill Maher. I like his show. You know, so I sort of try and balance it a bit between regular news and, you know, people who look at it from a different angle or reporting on alternative news, and just sort of weigh it all up and, you know, take it all in. So.
Yeah, you got to be careful not to go all the way into the rabbit hole, or you can end up in some pretty crazy places.
Well, also, you know, I mean, as I say, I like to balance it with a normal life as well. You know, I mean, it is the sort of field where, I mean, I could if I wanted to, but I can't think anything worse. You know, of being on writing all day long and all night. You know, going to bed at 12, getting up at 6, and just doing that. And then when I've got a couple of hours spare, jumping up and picking up a book off the shelves on Roswell or something. That would drive me insane. I mean, literally, it would drive me insane. You know, I like to have balance a normal life with, you know, what I do in the day. This is what I do in the day. You know, at night, if I want to watch football, you know, English football or whatever, I've got all the channels on the TV where I can watch, you know, Manchester United or Liverpool or whoever. And, you know, Roswell or Bigfoot's not even on my mind anyway. You know, I'm just following the game or whatever. And so it's important to me because I think I would get frazzled, fried, and just burned out. Mm-hmm. You know, I'd be like some band, you know, that's doing 300 gigs in 365 days, you know, and they fall out with each other and they split because they can't take it, you know, and that's why I think it's important that you make that balance in your life.
Yeah, no, that's good. So back to UFOs a little bit. That's one of your favorite subjects. So what's your feeling right now about the whole phenomena, what's going on with it, and has that feeling changed over the years as you've investigated it?
Well, yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, I mean, when I first got into it all, it was all like UFOs were alien spacecraft, Bigfoot was a giant ape, etc. I mentioned earlier, you know, I think some of these cryptid creatures have sort of supernatural overtones to them, but certainly in the last 15 years or so, I've come far more around to the idea now that the UFO phenomenon, I think it probably isn't extraterrestrial in the way we understand it. I think it's alien in the terms that it's not human. But I'm more inclined to think it's something that kind of coexists with us, sort of John Keel's ultra-terrestrials or Jacques Vallée's sort of messages of deception, where there's a phenomenon that sort of, coexists in like another realm or dimension that interacts with us. And maybe, over the centuries, it's masqueraded in different forms to protect its real identity. Sort of the demons of thousands of years ago to goblins in the 1500s, the Space Brothers in the 50s, the Greys today. It's like the phenomenon's constantly mutating. But throughout history, we've got tales of sort of magical entities that interact with us. And there's often like a sexual component. You have hundreds of years ago, thousands, you have like the incubus and the succubi, that would sort of, intrude on people's bedrooms in the middle of the night. In the 1500s, 1600s, you had fairies stealing babies and leaving what were known as changelings behind, like crude carved effigies. Today, in the abductions, you've got the genetic angle and the hybrid baby angle. So, the motif has stayed the same, but the entities have changed. And I think I actually think we're dealing with the same phenomenon, but it's camouflaging itself for reasons we don't understand. And I think it comes from far closer to home than it does from the stars. But it doesn't take away the fact that it's non-human and it is definitively unknown. So, as I said, I've gone further away from the extraterrestrial side, more like a cross between like techno-paranormal type creatures or something like that.
What do you lend any credence to the idea that it could be like the evolution of our consciousness and our culture itself in the changing in the phenomena?
Well, I do in one sense. I don't think. Well, I'll tell you the way I think it is happening like that. I think this phenomenon appears or manifests for us in certain ways that are applicable and relevant to the folklore, the pop culture, and the beliefs of the people of that era. That's why thousands of years ago these things appeared as demons. It's why in the Middle Ages they appeared as fairies and goblins. And today, in an era when we believe in extraterrestrials, that's who they claim to be. And I think the reason they appear like that is because I think they have the ability to get into our minds and sort of pull out the imagery that's locked in there. It's like if you ask any kid over the age of probably 5, draw an alien, they're going to draw a big head with black eyes, because everybody over that age just knows that image. They don't have to be taught. They just know what an alien is supposed to look like. Mm-hmm. And I think the phenomenon can pull that out of us, and it appears according to how our perceptions expect it to. So in other words, I do think part of pop culture and our reality and who we are is responsible for how it appears, not because it's just imagination, but the phenomenon is responding to what we see. And also I have a big interest in what are called tulpas. That's the idea that the human mind can actually create imagery that it can then externalize, and it almost like you give birth to a paranormal creation of the mind that has like a quasi-independent existence. And tulpas supposedly feed on high states of human emotion. In other words, they need to be seen to frighten or excite the witness, and then they bleed the person dry of energy. It's like a psychic vampire, yeah. And that might explain why, so many UFO incidents or Bigfoot encounters seem to conveniently occur when someone's around. It's almost like the event is staged for them. And maybe, if the whole point is to terrify the witness, and then the phenomenon can feed on them. Maybe that's the whole point of the phenomenon. It exists to be seen because essentially we're its food, albeit like an energy-based food.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that's fucking crazy. Hopefully that shit don't happen to me. I seen a UFO once, but I felt okay after.
Well, the reason I mention that is because that's something that pops up in a lot of Men in Black stories. Where, for example, somebody will see a UFO and they get the visit from these MIB, which in reality, they're nothing like Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones in the movies. They're sort of creepy little guys, like 5 feet tall, skin the color of a bottle of milk, very creepy, and have this menacing atmosphere of dread almost it creates in the person. And a lot of witnesses have said that when the MIB had interviewed them or interrogated them, the person has felt like a diabetic who's missed a meal, and they're starting to crash and their energy levels are gone, as if these entities, these MIB, have literally kind of, bled them dry of some sort of psychic energy. There's a lot of stories like that, and it makes me wonder if, the whole point of the MIB visit isn't necessarily to silence the person, but to terrify them, because, it acts as a source of energy and, in simple terms, food, for the MIB.
Yeah, I think I've even heard some stories where they've got no eyebrows or no eyelashes.
Yeah, no, I mean, literally no hair. I mean, I shave my head every day, but by 5 o'clock in the afternoon, it looks like the stubble on, you look like 5 o'clock shadow on your chin. You know what I mean? But these, they look adult, but they've got the skin and the texture like a baby's face, which looks, so they look really weird and unsettling, and people feel this sense of there's something not right and something unsettling about them. They've got these starey eyes, and more than a few people have actually said the eyes are kind of like the eyes of a dog when it's about to bite you, and you back away because you can tell what's coming next. So they're very strange and odd-looking characters that do create a really unsettling feeling in people.
When you talk about all this tulpa stuff and some of the consciousness or almost telepathic aspect of it, it makes me think of channeling, and I think that channeling also doesn't get a fair shake from the whole Fortean community. I've read some books, and I don't follow it a lot, but I've seen and heard enough that I kind of think that it should be taken a little bit more seriously. But then you've got those extreme cases that everybody wants to kind of make fun of the whole channeling aspect.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's unfortunate. That's the same in every aspect of the UFO phenomenon. Somebody can pick up a really credible case, and then somebody will say, well, this is just garbage because, look at this story. But, I mean, I wrote a book back in 2009 called Contactees, which was a study of, people like George Adamski, George Van Tassel, and most of the early contactees like Howard Menger and Truman Bethram, Orfeo Angelucci. And a lot of researchers today, they just write these stories off about the Space Brothers, coming down. I don't take the stories literally. Yeah. What I think is that these stories were almost like visionary, and it was this phenomenon interacting and responding to the pop culture beliefs of the period and appearing as the form of long-haired aliens or hot-looking space women or whatever, But I think they were more visionary experiences where the person not imagined it, but they had a Matrix-type experience. And in a lot of these cases, the witnesses, contrary to what people think, it wasn't all metal saucers coming down and landing. They had these experiences in altered states where, the laws of the Space Brothers or whatever would be channeled into their minds. And again, I don't think a lot of it is hoaxing or anything like this. You can go back, you look at, for example, the story of Moses going up the mountain and getting the Ten Commandments. Well, there's not much difference between, Moses going up into the mountains, seeing a burning bush, and being given these rules and regulations about how to live, specifically 10 of them, and a contactee in the 50s going out into the California desert and meditating and having these laws and rules channeled into his or her head saying, this is how you got to live. There's not much difference. So, I think it's important that we shouldn't ignore channeling. What I do think is that I think there are benevolent and malevolent and manipulative entities out there, and I think what we do have to be is very careful how we interpret the message that comes through from channeling and how we should interpret it and accept it. And even if we should accept it, or should we be suspicious of it? Is it trying to help us? Is it trying to teach us? Is it manipulating us? Or is it outright lying to us? I think we've got to take each thing in its merits or otherwise. But channeling, is something that, throughout the centuries, it's always gone on. People have always communed with higher beings, whether it's in a wide awake form or it's with psychedelics, altered states, whether we're talking about LSD, peyote, whatever. It's something that's always gone on, and messages have come through. And I think it's a part of human nature that we are able to contact other forms of life. But, it's like when you're dealing with people, you got to be careful as to what the person's telling you,
We had a great chat just the other day about psychedelics with Dennis McKenna, and it's funny because people describe a lot of the same sort of things when they're having these experiences on psychedelics.
Well, yeah, I mean, as I said, if it's psychedelics or, if it's something like mescaline or peyote or DMT, the thrust of many of these experiences is the person, sort of sees metaphorical doors opening and things come through. It's as if the phenomena, when you're in an altered state, it's like the phenomena recognizes that you can see it. It's like its cover's being blown because in normal reality you don't see it. It's the best way I can describe it. It's kind of like putting on heat-seeking glasses, and not before you've got them on, you're in the woods late at night and you don't see anything. You put the heat-seeking glasses on, you see the outline of this wild boar roaming 20 feet in front of it. It's like that. It's sort of you've seen something that was there, but you weren't able to recognize it beforehand. And I think that's like that with psychedelics, that phenomena exist around us, but you have to be in an altered state to at least see some of it. And I think, whatever puts you in that altered state, it's the state that is important, not necessarily what it was that got you there. Sometimes people can achieve this through things like trance meditation, where there are no psychedelics involved, but they're able to still open the same door. So it is a case of if you can get your mind into that altered state, then things can happen, But the important and weird thing is these things can see that you can see them. That's when it can get a little bit dicey if you're dealing with, malevolent ones. So.
Speaking of meditation, do you ever partake in meditative?
I've done a few things like that. I mean, what I have done on a lot of occasions is sort of, put the word out, sort of lay quiet, still, meditate, try and get yourself into an altered state, and put the word out or a thought out of something that you want to look into. People might think this sounds crazy, but when I've been investigating something, I've hit a brick wall. I've actually done this, and then forgot about it. A couple of days later, somebody will contact me out the blue. My father worked at whatever, and he told me this story. It's actually related to something that I was researching, and that's happened on a lot of occasions to where I do believe, you put the word out and you're able to do it in a fashion where, it projects a message that something picks up on it. And if it's a positive thing, it comes back at you in a positive way, And that's why I always say to people, if you get involved in the paranormal, be careful, what you ask for, because I think people who are sort of a weak character and things like that, I actually do really believe there are sort of like, malevolent, sinister entities there that get their grips into weak-willed people. And that's why sometimes, their lives collapse. Everything goes wrong for them, or they get further and further into the occult, and everything just goes totally wrong. And that's why I always say be careful, because it isn't all sort of cool and great. There's hazards to look for. So.
Yeah, it's like the whatever you would call the partition separating the two realities isn't as wide as we might think.
No, it's like a click of the fingers away, but it's how you access it. And I think these phenomena, they can do it naturally, or it's second nature to them. It's like us jumping in a swimming pool or something, if you walk from land to water, and things like that with them. But for us, most of the time can't do it. It's just occasionally when you're in the right frame and the setting's right and everything else. It's like with psychedelics. The setting is as important, and the mood and the setting are as equally as important parts of it. Sometimes under psychedelics, if you go into it in a concerned, worried, and negative sense, and worried it's all going to go wrong, chances are the experience or the vision will. That's why it isn't for everybody, because it's like some people can't think outside of, some people just think negative on everything. They don't think about what can go right. So it's probably not for them,
Yeah, bad trips are shitty.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's why, people, I think it's important, to be responsible about stuff. It's not like, oh, you're just some stoner, or whatever, where you're going to try and manifest aliens, then crash on the couch with a bag of potato chips. It's not like that. It's more along the lines of actually opening your mind to the idea that something else is there and sort of subconsciously inviting it in, which is, it's far different from, just looking for nuts and bolts aliens or whatever.
Well, Nick, we'd like to really thank you again for coming on. It's been an absolutely fascinating chat. Before we let you go, do you want to let the listeners know kind of where they can track your stuff down? Anything else maybe you want people to know about? And we'll link to it all in the show notes, of course, as well. Cool.
Well, yeah, people can reach me at my blog, which it's called Nick Redfern's World of Whatever, and the address is Nick Redfern Fortean, Fortean. .blogspot.com, and as I said, the other blogs that I used to have, they're all listed at that blog, but that's the one I update pretty much every day, and it covers everything from UFOs, Bigfoot, strange creatures, conspiracies, you name it, and I'll be doing a couple of upcoming conferences. One, the Paracon conference in September in Kansas City. Then I'll be speaking at a MUFON conference in Philadelphia in the first weekend of October. Then the Paradigm Symposium, in Minneapolis in late October. But all the exact details and dates are listed on the right-hand side of the blog. Or people can reach me at Facebook. Just type me in at Facebook and whatever.
And Twitter as well? Are you on Twitter too?
Oh yeah, I'm on Twitter as well, and what I usually do with Twitter mainly, I just sort of post links there of latest things I do. But Facebook and the blog is where I post a lot of material, and there are actually a few Nick Redferns on Facebook. But there's a new photograph of me wearing an England T-shirt with an England Union Jack flag on. So if you see that one, that's me.
Yeah, we'll track it down and link to that in the show notes so people can track you right down. And then, of course, Graham and I are both planning on attending Paradigm if all goes according to plan as well. Oh, cool. So we'll see you there again.
Well, I know I didn't realise till I checked the site the other day, because I haven't had my flight tickets or whatever come yet, but I didn't realise it's at a new venue for this year.
Yeah, we just found out too, but I think rooms are going to be a little cheaper. It's really too bad because that Doubletree Hilton, it was a good kind of layout for everything. And
yeah, I'm happy though because I'd rather be closer to downtown so you can kind of take off and you got some more options,
Yeah. But it should be a good gig again. I think they'll get a good turnout. So.
Okay, well, thanks again, Nick, and we'll probably hopefully we can have you on again when the new book comes out in October.
All right, that sounds great, guys. Thanks a lot.